All right, let's dive into one of the most monumental novels ever written, Victor Hugo's Les Misérables. It's this sprawling, incredible epic about justice, love, and revolution. And the key to unlocking this massive story, it's all in that one, often misunderstood word in its title. So we all know the title translates to the miserable ones. But what if that's just too simple? What if miserable is pointing to something much deeper and honestly much more dangerous than just not having enough money? Get this. In Turkish, the title is sefir, which comes from the word sefil. And this word is fascinating because it has this double meaning. On the one hand, yeah, it means exactly what you think, wretchedly poor, totally destitute. But on the other hand, it means morally vile, someone so broken down that they're capable of anything. And that one word just perfectly sums up the book's central question. When society crushes you, which kind of miserable do you become? The poor victim or the debased villain? So who was the man who came up with this powerful question? Well, Victor Hugo wasn't just a novelist. In a lot of ways, he was the conscience of 19th century France, a real political firebrand who used his pen like a weapon to fight for social justice. And you can see on this timeline, his convictions were absolutely lifelong. I mean, as early as 1829, he's protesting the death penalty. By 1851, his fierce opposition to Napoleon III's coup actually gets him forced into exile for almost 20 years. And it's from that exile that he writes Les Misérables. So for him, this book wasn't just a story, it was a political statement. It's really no surprise that when he died, he wasn't just buried as a writer, but as a national hero. Okay, so what kind of world was creating these miserable ones? To really get this novel, we have to step into the France of that time. And it was turbulent. It was a crucible of change. The whole story is set in the decades right after the French Revolution. The old world of kings and aristocrats had been totally shattered. But that promise of liberty, equality, and fraternity, it hadn't really come true for most people. Instead, you had this era of failed republics, restored monarchies, and just crushing poverty in the slums of Paris. This is the world that forged the characters of Les Misérables. Now, what's so interesting is that Hugo doesn't start this massive epic in the slums or on a revolutionary barricade. He starts in this quiet little town with one man who becomes the moral compass for the entire novel. Bishop Myriel. He's a man so kind, the locals actually call him Monseigneur Bienvenu, which means Monseigneur Welcome. So when the bishop first gets to the town of Digne, they give him this luxurious palace right next to a super cramped, overflowing hospital. He sees this injustice immediately and makes this radical decision. He insists they swap. He moves into the tiny hospital building and gives the grand palace over to the sick and the poor. As a bishop, he got a pretty substantial salary from the state, 15,000 francs. But what's truly incredible is what he did with it. Hugo actually gives us the bishop's budget, and it's just amazing. 40% of his income went directly to the poor. Another huge chunk, over 38%, went to local charities and schools. And for his own personal expenses, a tiny 6%, just 1/15 of his whole income. He literally gave almost everything away. And this charity was matched by this radical fearlessness. The man was known for traveling alone through mountains that were crawling with bandits. And when people would warn him about how dangerous it was, his calm reply was that maybe the bandits were the ones who needed a priest the most. This story about the bandit Cravat really shows his impact best. So after Cravat robs a cathedral, the bishop fearlessly travels right through the bandits' territory. And while he's there, a mysterious chest is delivered to him. Inside, all the stolen treasures returned by Cravat himself. The bishop's goodness was so powerful, it didn't just help the poor, it could actually disarm the dangerous. And this is the crucial point, right? Hugo spends the first part of his massive novel so carefully building this portrait of radical goodness. And there's a reason. Before he can introduce us to all the darkness in the world, he needs to establish this powerful, unwavering source of light. This quote right here is the key to his entire philosophy, and really to Hugo's as well. The bishop is arguing that the faults of the weak are actually the faults of the powerful. It's a stunningly modern idea of shared social responsibility, and it becomes the moral bedrock for the whole novel. And that brings us to the moment where the whole story just ignites. Hugo has built this incredible engine of compassion. Now he's about to test it. The question that drives the rest of this epic novel is simple. What happens when this perfect goodness meets a soul that has been completely crushed by injustice? What happens when Jean Valjean knocks on the bishop's door? It's that collision between radical grace and profound misery that defines Les Misérables and honestly continues to challenge us today.